Hey everybody, it's Jim, it's Matt, and like we said, we talk football here all the time, but we also enjoy baseball, and there's a lot of breaking news going on. Least of which, from a standpoint of most important, Matthew, I'll give you the opportunity to break it. About 30 minutes ago, the trade went. The signing went down in Charm City.
Yeah. So the Orioles have come to an agreement on terms with first baseman Pete Alonso, formerly of the New York Mets. The money in the deal is 155 million over 5 years.
Hmm.
Um, it's a move that for the Orioles signals the seriousness they have about their baseball team. I think a lot of people had a lot of questions about what was going on in Baltimore really after this last season when they traded a lot of pieces away and it felt like they were losing the grip on their championship window that seemed to have opened with their young core. They refused to sign pitching, they refused to trade for pitching, and it seemed like the lineup was starting to suffer. Well, now the people in Baltimore are spending, and the AL East has turned into a great arms race with the Red Sox and Yankees still kind of sitting on their hands right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Uh, David Rubenstein is the guy who owns the Baltimore Orioles. David is a Baltimorean guy. Last year, what was going on was to just clear things up a little bit here. When the Angeles family sold the team to David Rubenstein, he committed to making them, a winner again. It didn't happen. They got some kids who came in and they kind of overachieved. They did better than I think a lot of people expected them to. That first year, then the second year fell off. What David was trying to do was get out from under a number of issues that was created for the Orioles, and so it's true to form. I think now that David has cleared up all of those problems, that he feels comfortable to make investments. They're in on a couple of first line pitchers, and they're having conversations. It's funny, they're having conversations with the Nationals about Mackenzie Gore, uh, a very good young left-hander, um,
Mhm.
and those two teams didn't even talk to each other since the time that from 2005 when the Nationals got to town till the Angelos family gave up on it. They didn't even. There was no trades, no nothing, no talking. So uh, there's a lot of things going on. Look for Baltimore to get better. Are they going to get better enough? I don't know, but they certainly are not wasting time trying to, you know, to get those deals done and get in place. And they've got some really good pieces from a standpoint of some really good pieces of to trade.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of options here. They can go free agency and fix some places they desperately need, and they also can go trade and do it.
Yeah, I think a big piece of this for Baltimore is that when everybody got better last year, it felt like you
Hmm.
just kind of sat around and waited. Um,
Hmm.
you didn't really. It felt like you had an opportunity to pounce
Hmm.
based on what you'd done in 2023, and 24 was a bit of a dud year for the Orioles.
Right. Hmm.
Now that signals that they're turning things back around. The worry was is like, well, they're going to let all these guys get away,
Hmm.
and like now you're looking at maybe trading like a Gunnar Henderson or something like that if this
Hmm.
continues to trend that way.
Right.
Now the hope is the other way. Now the hope is like, okay,
Yeah.
we still have this young core, we have a lot of bats, we still have a decent farm system.
Hmm.
We have the ability to make moves and move back towards the top of that AL East because if the Red Sox and Yankees don't make any moves, the way the rosters are currently constructed,
Hmm.
neither of those teams are championship contenders right now.
Hmm.
Just as currently suited, they are not championship contenders right now.
Hmm.
The Orioles aren't. the Orioles are things clicking back into place for Adley Rutschman and all their younger players, away from being right back in there in the World Series conversation.
Yeah, I think what Rubenstein did in the offseason is he retooled the front office. He basically went out and invested heavily in analytics, and for the first time since he bought the team, David is actually involved with the team. Now, I say that to say this. That's not saying he's looking over everybody's shoulder and pulling the strings. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that he's actively wants them, meaning his front office people, to do whatever it takes to make them a winning team. He realizes that uh, the Orioles have an opportunity, and if he has to spend some money to make that, as you said, and rightfully so, they got a lot of young kids on that team that can play.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got a lot of kids in the minors, which they can trade and get players.
Mm-hmm.
So, right now, the Orioles are taking a page, out of the Blue Jays and some of the others, teams around the league where they say, okay, what do I need in free agency? I'll get it. What do I need to trade to get what I need? And we got the assets to do it. So, the arrow is pointing up for the Orioles, and whether or not they're a playoff team or not is still debatable. But they're making moves, and I think that's for the Orioles fan base. I think that's a very good, encouraging sign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So we talked about the arms race. So you've got the Orioles that have now went out and they inked Pete Alonso to that 5-year, $155 million deal.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Blue Jays who inked Dylan Cease to an 8-year, $210 million deal.
Right,
Couple like a week or two before the winter meetings
right.
began, and now two teams that you expected to be pretty active in the Red Sox and the Yankees. I think the Red Sox more than the Yankees, just based on the way the rosters are constructed.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't done anything. They're both sitting there. They haven't done anything. Not to discount the Rays, but I don't think the Rays are in a place where they're really looking to contend in this upcoming year, just based on what they have roster wise and what their constraints are financially. And just speaking from the Boston side of things, and being reading a lot of the stuff online and interacting with some of the fans on Twitter, seeing that stuff, there's like unrest in Boston. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if it's the same in New York, but there's unrest. The ownership group has faced these cheap allegations, and I mean rightfully so. They have been extremely cheap ever since they traded away Mookie Betts
Right.
and at the end of 2019, and they haven't really beaten those allegations. It felt like they did last year when they go out and they get Crochet and they sign him to the extension, and you sign Roman Anthony to an extension, and you sign Alex Bregman to that contract. Bregman's opted out. Those two pieces that you signed to extensions are good, but those two pieces weren't enough to make you a championship contender last year. You have to add more. And when the report comes out that they weren't willing to match the Orioles 5-year, or
Mm-hmm.
their offer wasn't that of the Orioles 5-year, $155 million offer, it feels unacceptable for a front office that has told everybody. And when I say everybody, I'm saying it was their messaging to fans, it was their messaging to current free agents, it was messaging to the free agents that they were ready to spend and really ready to continue building this roster as they believe their championship window is starting to open. And this being the start of things in the offseason in terms of the dominoes falling, this will not fall in the Red Sox way with their necessity for power that Craig Breslow, the president of baseball operations, has talked about really since the season ended, how they needed some power in the middle of the lineup. This power fit, and they didn't hit on this power. And so there's a lot of people that are very unhappy right now in Boston.
You know, I've known Pine Bloom for a long time, and he's now in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't speak to him specifically about, the payroll or what went on in Boston. But I do know a lot of people in Boston said that Heim had gone to ownership with a number of things that he thought, they could do, and ownership said no, I'm not going to do
Mhm.
it. To your point, I think the biggest problem, and this is just from me looking at it, not as a fan of the Red Sox, I respect the Red Sox,
Mhm.
not a fan. Um, the Fenway Group makes more money off Liverpool than they do the Red Sox.
Mhm.
When you start getting into that kind of, you know, diversity, right?
Mhm.
Where do you put the number on what you're going to spend, on a team that makes you $770 million in revenue last season versus a team that brought you just a little bit over $300 million in revenue?
Yeah. No, it's definitely interesting to see like the way that they're going about it. I don't know what like there is no I understand why they don't spend as much on the Red Sox now in terms of the financial aspect, but people like it's not an acceptable answer to be the owner of the Red Sox and spend the way that they've spent in the fan base's eyes. And so they have to fix something um, along those lines. Otherwise, the fan distrust. You bought yourself some leeway last offseason,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't do it one off season and expect the entire fan base to just be like, "Oh, all right, John Henry and ownership, we forgive you now. Like we're good. You guys got Crochet, you signed Roman Anthony long term. We're fine." Like that's not an acceptable answer
Mm-hmm.
for them. And so something is going to like they need to make moves. I'm not saying that this is the end of the world for the Red Sox or anything like that, but this is something where if they don't start making moves, then they're going to like as quickly as these fans bought back in and sold
Mm-hmm.
Fenway out and turned Fenway into that environment. If you go down the path that this may signal a start of, then you're in danger of not doing like however much money you make out of attendance and stuff like that is going to plummet. Like people will stop showing up to these games because one year, even in that one year, the trade deadline, people felt like the Red Sox were cheap and reverting back to their own ways when they weren't able to get a big time addition for the rest of the season. So the way that Red Sox fans have like trained their brains to think really since the Mookie Betts trade, and I know
Mm-hmm.
they've had some success in there. They made the ALCS in 2021, but the way they've spent in free agency, it's created a lot of like there's not much trust between the Red Sox front office and ownership group and the fans right now, and it's a place like where eventually fans stop being dumb. You talked about Heim Bloom and him
Mm-hmm.
being in St. Louis and how they told him no. Everybody blamed Heim Bloom while he was there, and then once he left, he kind of took like a step back, and everybody realized it was like, oh, like this guy was charged with the task of building this farm system, and then they just kicked him to the curb once they kind of had felt like he did his job and looked for
Mm-hmm.
the next thing because Heim Bloom did a really good job with what he was charged to do. What he was charged to do was he was charged with building the Red Sox farm system. It's the
Mm-hmm.
reason Greg Breslow is their president of baseball operations right now. Because after they fired Heim Bloom, they went out looking. No one wanted to work for the Red Sox because Heim Bloom did what he was asked to do and then got fired for it. So they have done a lot of damage in terms of their fan interest over the years, and things have a chance to continue to go like to turn back south as opposed to the northern direction it was headed
Mm-hmm.
um, during the past off season and season.
Just on Heim Bloom, just for a little bit more. When Heim Bloom signed his deal with the Red Sox, there were 9 other teams that wanted Chaim Bloom. And he personally came out of the Tampa Bay Rays organization. But Chaim Bloom was a die-hard Boston Red Sox fan. It was his dream to work for the Boston Red Sox. And now, it didn't. It took him about 20 minutes after he got fired to get hired by St. Louis. But what concerns me, Matt, in baseball, in all sports, but we'll just use the Red Sox as a template for this. The Red Sox, when John Henry and Warner bought the team, right? They weren't all that rich. I mean, they were rich. Don't get me wrong. You don't get to where they are without being rich. But we're not talking multi-billionaire rich. But what they did do is they used the Boston Red Sox, the Red Sox brand, Fenway Park, to develop a massive portfolio of sports teams, going all the way down into NASCAR. And also, the Dunkin' Donuts arrangement that they have, the franchising of that. I mean, they are a conglomerate. So what started off as 2 guys who supposedly loved the Red Sox and wanted to do good for the Red Sox, it's now it's a corporation. The Red Sox are a corporation. When you look out, and it's called Fenway Enterprises, they're using the name of the stadium to help them leverage deals around the world. So if I'm a fan of the Red Sox, yeah, you think I'm pissed? I am pissed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean they
do you really need a NASCAR team?
No, they don't. I mean, if I remember correctly, the Fenway Sports Group currently is the owner. They currently have ownership in the Pittsburgh Penguins as well, don't they?
Well, one of their minority owners does, but what they did do, and this is crazy, because he's a minority owner, owner in the Sox, he gave part of the deal is now Nesson does the Penguins hockey.
Really?
So what happens is Nesson in Pittsburgh. I mean, Nesson took over Pittsburgh. Took over the regional sports network there, and so so he owns the Penguins, but the Penguins contribute to Fenway Sports through the fact that they signed a deal with Nesson, which they own part of.
Mm-hmm.
So they're actually making money off the Penguins.
Yeah, they've just got their portfolio is too vast, and when that portfolio is like that, like it opens them up for criticism. Not that John Henry cares about the criticism per se, because to be honest with you, I think he doesn't. Not one singular bit. But like when they traded Rafael Devers last season, they immediately had a large signing with Liverpool.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was immediately the Red Sox suffered because Liverpool made this signing. Like that,
right.
That's what happened, is what they felt like. Now, I think a lot of stories have come out and everybody can see that probably wasn't the case, but
right.
It's optically a terrible look. Talked about it in college football, the optics of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you think these teams with these massive owners and like these massive groups would have the forethought and the wherewithal to think like, hey, people aren't necessarily happy right now.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do to ease this? Like ease this. Like maybe we don't do X right this second. And they just seem to be oblivious to the public perception of the Red Sox right now. I mean, Sam Kennedy has been put on blast these last couple of years
Hmm.
because every single year he talks about how the Red Sox are going to spend. And
Hmm.
man, have they not spent a good like 80% of the time he's gotten up to the podium after a season. It was like, we're going to make this team better. And to be honest with you, I don't know if it's something that he actually has knowledge of or not, but like it's a terrible look when he continues to do that.
Well, if you're Fenway Sports, you know, you take money and invest it where you feel that you can get a return on investment. I can't fathom how investing in the Red Sox is going to not reap some sort of benefit.
Hmm.
I mean, look, would Pete Alonso been a great add to to the Red Sox? Absolutely, but they only wanted to go 3 years on a deal
Hmm.
with Pete, and Pete wanted a 5 year deal, and the only team out there that was willing to give him a 5 year deal were the Orioles, and he signed for $5 million more. That Orioles deal, by the way, was given to Kyle Schwarber, and Schwarber decided to stay in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So he Schwarber, which we talked about the other day about the culture in staying with teams that were, whether you're the Dodgers or the Phillies, or teams where it's a family that everybody loves being around. Schwarber took a $5 million you know hit to stay in Philly because he could have had that contract the Orioles put out there. You'd mentioned the Rays a little earlier. Um, they are at a point now where you know they just got the books. They're working on the stadium deals. They got all kinds of things going. They literally came out um, a few weeks ago, did a press conference with the owners, and said, "Look, we're only asking you to be patient for a while. We have we got a lot of little things here we got to get done. Not
Hmm.
least of which is where to build the stadium." Um, and we just want you to give us a little bit of grace time before you start screaming that we're not doing what we're supposed to do. And so the fans at this point in time seem to feel comfortable doing that. So I can see that area, but the Yankees and the Red Sox, because they've become so diversified in their sports portfolios, that you know is how much, I guess the bottom line at this point, how much does baseball matter to them anymore?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the signaling from John Henry again last year felt like they like cared about baseball again. And
Hmm.
I think that's why people are upset, is because they see a guy like this and they like, at least from an outsider's perspective, Pete Alonso just seemed like a perfect fit. Like the Red Sox needed right-handed power. Their
Hmm.
leading home run hitter was Trevor Story, who had 25 last year.
Right.
That kind of power is not going to get you through a major league season
Hmm.
if he's your leading bat. And fans know that. Like they're not dumb. They have a hole at first base right now because Tristan Casas, their young first baseman,
Hmm.
had a pretty serious injury last year, and you're really not sure on the status of him.
Right.
And so it's a guy in Pete Alonso where if he had signed with the Red Sox, then you have the option to play him at first base until Casas gets healthy. And then when Casas does get healthy, you can platoon him at DH and first base and just kind of flip back and forth. It seemed to make sense in terms of filling a hole and what he provided based on what the Red Sox needed. And it feels like they missed out on him because he was cheap. I
Hmm.
think it probably had a lot more to do with the years than the money. But that's not the way people see it.
Hmm.
And so, in a way, I get it because the expectation from the fan base, however unrealistic it is to sign everybody.
Hmm.
That is unrealistic. Like this is not a video game. This is not MLB the Show.
Right.
We don't run the off season and just go spend about you know as much money as we humanly want to.
Hmm.
for every free agent. Like that's not the real world.
Mhm.
But still, when you see one that makes a fit like that, it's frustrating to watch them get away.
Yeah, Buck Showalter told me last summer that we talked about a bunch of different players, and we landed on Pete Alonso, and he said to me, he said, "You know what?" He said, "There's not a Major League Baseball player out there that is that dislikes Pete Alonso." And he said, "You know who he reminds me of?" I said, He said, "Freddie Freeman." He said, "Everybody loves Freddie." He says when you see it, because obviously Buck had the Mets for a while, and he said,
Mhm.
uh, what you like about him, what the players, the opposing team likes about him, is when the guy gets on first base, he's asking about the family, what's going on, or he's busting jokes, or said, "Have you seen a movie?" I mean, he never stops talking to people at first base. It's one of those kind of things, and he's just genuinely a nice guy. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that the reason that the Mets fans are hair on fire is okay, what was our problem last year? Well, we had Alonso backing up. He was the bat behind um, behind um, shoot, why am I forgetting his name? Juan Soto,
Mhm.
and so where do we go from here? I mean, where are you going to find a bat on the open market that's equivalent to Pete Alonso? You didn't get Schwarber. You let Alonso go. So where do you get that bat?
Mhm. Yeah, and that is the reason. Like that's the reason Red Sox fans are upset. There's no, and I mean, really, honestly, any team that needed power, your
Hmm.
power is really off. Like your high end power in
Right.
terms of Schwarber and Alonso. And now, granted, I'm not sure who really thought that Kyle Schwarber was going to go anywhere but Philadelphia in
Hmm.
this offseason. Like I know it had been hypothesized out there, but it seemed
Hmm.
like once you really got down into the nitty gritty of it, everybody kind of expected Schwarber to return to Philadelphia. Um, where do you find that power now? If you're one of those teams that is power needy, it's not easy. You're gonna be taking a chance most likely on one of the Japanese players, whether it be Akamoto or
Hmm.
Murakami. Um, and then you get into the guys where you've got holes in their game. Like Eugenio Suarez had a fantastic year last year,
Hmm.
and when he went to Seattle, he kind of stopped having as fantastic of a year. And he's a high strikeout guy. And so for some teams, like for the Red Sox in particular, the appeal of Pete Alonso wasn't just his power. It was the fact that Pete Alonso also hit 270 last year
Hmm.
to go along with the home runs. You know, Eugenio Suarez is hitting like 225, 230 when he's hitting all these bombs. Big reason why Cal Raleigh didn't win the MVP last year is because his average wasn't high enough. He was batting in
Hmm.
the 240s, I think he was.
Right.
So the batting average and the strikeout rate are really what was impressive about Alonso and Schwarber when you were
Hmm.
able to pair those with the power that they presented.
Well, I think you're right, and I also think that both Schwarber and, by example, Schwarber and Pete, by example, showed what being a teammate stood for.
Mhm.
And those are intangibles you cannot buy. You can't buy chemistry. We've
No.
talked about that before. And when Pete, you know, is one of those guys. Now, I will say that the Rays spoke to Pete about a 1 year pillow contract where he would be paid a great deal of money, and from that standpoint, he wasn't interested, and that was okay. I mean, there was no harm, no foul. Um, One other thing with regard to contracts and Schwarber, to your point about he was never going to go anywhere. Um, there are times when if let's say the Phillies wanted to extend Schwarber, right? It might have been more complicated to do that than to just break off and go to free agency and come back and restructure a contract.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, I don't think I agreed with you. I didn't think he was ever leaving Philadelphia. Now, the fact that he was a free agent didn't concern me because I figured, okay, Schwarber has said numerous times, I want to be in Philadelphia. The Phillies have said we want to keep him in Philadelphia. So, what does that didn't concern me because I know that they could just sit down, decide on a number, and number being the number of years versus the number of dollars that you want to spend, and come up with a clean contract as opposed to try to you know add on to a contract that he already had. So sometimes it's not always, but sometimes it's easier to just break that old contract off. In other words, just let it go and become a free agent, and then go back and sign with your team. And that was how that was going. You were 100% right that Kyle Schwarber wasn't leaving, you know, the 215 area code. That was not happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he is, and that's where he's going to stay for the next 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's Schwarber was the right signing in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
Like it felt like Dave Dombrowski's job. Obviously, it didn't solely hinge on Kyle Schwarber returning,
No,
but it was important for the city and for really Dombrowski to be able to show up and sit in a suite peacefully that Schwarber returned to Philly.
yeah, and that Phillies team, it's crazy to say because they've got their core group's getting older,
Mm-hmm.
but they realize that their window, at least for now, is open. I don't think when it comes to the amount of money the Phillies and the Mets and the Yankees and some of these teams are willing to pay, they'll eat the end of the last 2 or 3 years of Schwarber's contract, and they don't care
Mm-hmm.
because they care about winning now, and Schwarber can help them do that. Schwarber wants 5 years, fine, we'll give him 5 years because we know that if we win a World Series, that will pay for anything we need to worry about with regard to that.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with JT Realmuto. They've got guys who are coming to the end of their contracts and also coming to the end of what might be their most productive times. That's okay if you realize, okay, this is a window. What are we going to do? Are we going to hamstring ourselves for years to beyond if we do if we sign somebody to a very long term contract?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I know to you, me, and a lot of people, $150 million is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
A 5 year, $150 million contract to a Major League Baseball team, specifically the Phillies, is basically nothing.
Yeah, not really. It's 30 million annual average.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it, that's the deal that Alonso got. Little extra on top, but yeah, it's not a lot. Now, granted, when you're at the cap threshold, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that the luxury tax thresholds are really an issue in Philadelphia,
No.
or really all that much a part of the thought process in Philadelphia. As
Mm-hmm.
we talked about Boston's hamstrung. They're trying to stay under that second threshold, which is 264 million. But when you start getting up into those thresholds, that's when it can start playing a factor, those $30 million
Right.
numbers,
Mm-hmm.
because the level between those tiers can get a little bit tight in terms of how much money you can spend.
Right.
Um, and they've signed Schwarber. I would be very interested. I think there's a 0% chance they get both of them, but I would assume that they'll make a push at getting one of two of Ranger Suarez and JT Realmuto back.
Yeah. If I had to guess between the two, I would guess that Realmuto would come back.
I would as well. Yeah, and I, in fairness to Ranger Suarez, because he was great last year. Like, he's been really good these last couple of years for Philadelphia. the starting pitching is where they can like give some stuff up. Like they
Right.
have some room. They still have Andrew Painter sitting in their farm system.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. I'm not sure if he's ready and waiting, but he's getting close.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they have that aspect as well in terms of the flexibility they have on their pitching rotation.
Let me throw some stuff here. See if you agree on it. Catchers, especially catchers on the level of Riamuto, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are, if you're offering them a reasonable amount of money and a reasonable deal, they're
Mm-hmm.
going to take it because the familiarity between Riamuto and the Philly pitching staff, which
Mm-hmm.
is where he's made his money in the last few years. To go and try to replicate that somewhere else is a very difficult thing. I don't think that people understand the how every pitch goes through the catcher to the pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like in football where you've got a playbook, you've got a pitching book on every pitcher you've got and every pitcher that the other team has.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's easier to sign a catcher, and specifically Remuto, who understands that he's on the back nine of his career,
Mm-hmm.
than it is to go to Ranger Suarez.
Yeah, it definitely is in terms of the familiarity,
Mm-hmm.
spot to spot. Like it was a big piece of the Cal Raleigh debate, really for
Mm-hmm.
MVP, is people talked about the extra work that went into being a catcher. It's kind of like a quarterback and a receiver. Like if a receiver gets traded someplace,
Mm-hmm.
you wonder why maybe they don't work out in this place the same way they worked out before.
Right.
Same goes with a quarterback. Is there's a lot of rhythm and timing
Mm-hmm.
that goes into getting familiar with your receivers or with your quarterback when you move
Mm-hmm.
locations. The same goes for a catcher. Like I know that there are so Connor Wong has been on the Red Sox for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Narvaez got called up last year, or he got traded for from the Yankees, and made the major league roster. And there was guys. I think Brian Bayo was really the biggest one because he's been in the Red Sox system for a while, and he and Connor Wong had worked together for a long time. So a lot of times, Connor Wong would catch Brian Bayo starts, not because Connor Wong was a significantly better defensive catcher than Carlos Narvaez, but because there was a familiarity there with Wong and Bayo that they felt comfortable with. Like you'll see that you kind of wonder when you watch some of these games, you're like, well, why is this person catching? A lot of times there are people that like a lot of pitchers have a preference of who catches them. They
Sure.
have a rhythm of who catches them. They understand, or the catcher may understand the pitcher on the mound a lot better than the other catcher in the clubhouse does. So it plays a really big factor when you're talking about catchers and why really it's such a position of value and why it's so like sought after. Like catching prospects, they're extremely hit or miss, but they're
Mm-hmm.
also extremely valuable because of the rarity that there is with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, look at the guys that are out there. Some of the ones who were legends like Johnny Bench, Pudge Fisk, and guys like that who they stayed. I mean, Gary Carter went from the Expos to the Mets, but for the most part, they try to stay where they are because of familiarity and because of longevity. I mean, you know, if I got to go and learn another pitching staff, that's not gonna help me.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of pressure put on the knees and just that whole situation, you get banged up with ball smacking off your shoulder, off your knee, off your all over the body. It's a tough it's a tough situation, but we'll see. I mean, the winter meetings are heating up. Um, whether the Red Sox or the Yankees do anything to improve themselves, the only thing I know right now that the Yankees are terrified of is losing Cody Bellinger,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and they might, you never know.
yeah. Bellinger is an interesting one. I was actually talking to one of my buddies who's a Yankees fan. He said it seems like there's a lot of talk about Bellinger in the
Mhm,
open market. He said it seems like there's a lot of people that want Bellinger, and he said I just kind of don't get it because he had a good year but not a great year. And I started thinking about it, and I think it's the Cody Bellinger is one of the more well-rounded players you're going to find on the open market.
mhm,
He hit about 280. He had in the upper 20s in home runs, and
mhm,
he plays really good defense in the outfield. When
mhm.
you combine all those things together, you've got a really valuable player. Um, I think the problem for New York is they want Bellinger back, but when Grisham accepted that qualifying offer, it hamstrings the things that they're able to do in the outfield because they have an excess in the outfield.
Right.
A similar sense of the Red Sox, but one of the Red Sox players isn't a free agent right now.
Mhm,
So they kind of have a decision to make. Are they gonna trade Jason Dominguez and retain Bellinger, or are they gonna sign Bellinger and maybe just kind of hold on to everybody and see how things work out?
mhm.
I don't know, but I do know that Bellinger appears to have a um, pretty deep market, all things considered.
I mean, Bellinger's kind of like your Swiss Army knife, right? He
Hmm.
can play the outfield, but he's also played three infield positions.
Yeah, and
So,
correct me if I'm wrong,
go
but I
ahead.
think he plays all three outfield positions, does he not?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
And all with almost, I'm not going to say all Gold Glove quality, but
Hmm.
he's more of a Gold Glove quality in center field than he is in the wing fields. But
Hmm.
left field or right field, he's above average in every one of the capacities there. He's a solid first baseman. He's been a solid second or third baseman. He's played second base a couple of times. So I mean, here's a guy who not only can he hit, but if you need him somewhere, he's going to be able to play in there.
Hmm.
And um, if you gave him a position to play every day, I'm sure he'd be happier with that. But at the same time, he's not going to hurt you in the outfield or in the infield because he's a good defensive player.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's really where his value is lying, and
Hmm.
in the ability to play multiple positions at a high level.
Hmm.
Like that feels like GM speak, because when they talk about players and they talk about their value, that's like seemingly the first thing, or at least in my brain, because of the mixing and matching the Red Sox have done over the past years. It's a phrase that I've become accustomed to. But for Bellinger, it's about as true. He's one of the higher level guys you can go plug multiple places.
Hmm.
Like you're not getting that kind of production from guys that you can plug and play in multiple places and have really good defense out of. And I say that because I've watched it with the Red Sox.
Hmm.
Cedar Rafael was a Gold Glover in center field this year.
Hmm.
Probably should have won the Platinum Glove, but that's a thing for a different time.
Hmm.
But he was hitting really well when he was playing center field. But when they moved him to second base, his average fell off a cliff. Now
Hmm.
his defense remained the same, but it's the ability that Bellinger has to juggle those positions, play them at a high level, and for his bat to be steady. Every baseball player has peaks and valleys throughout a season. That's
Hmm.
one thing. But you know what you're getting with Bellinger defensively, and you know you have a higher floor in terms of where his dips go, and
Hmm.
a higher ceiling than a lot of players that you can take and plug and play defensively in all these positions.
Well, I point people when we're talking about you know the the importance of ability to play multiple positions. If you look over the last two seasons when the Dodgers won the World Series, look at Kiki Hernandez. You know, look at Mookie Betts. Look at Justin Turner. I mean, they've got four or five guys on that team that can play more than one position, and not just play it well.
Mm,
that gives you the ability to carry less players, bench players, because you don't need the extra two or three bench players. You can end up, and the Dodgers needed every one of those other spots for the pitching that they had because of so many people getting hurt. But you look at the Dodgers, and that, you know, when you look out there and say, well, Kiki Hernandez, we need him at second base today, or maybe we go Mookie at second and we go Kiki at left, whatever. I mean, Teoscar has a better arm, but Kiki's not a bad outfielder.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've got guys who are plus outfielders. Mookie Betts is a plus outfielder.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, big time.
But at the same time, he's a plus infielder too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's not losing anything by putting these guys in the field.
Yeah, multiple positions of value. Like it's the model that the Dodgers have built their team around. Like is it always going to be the best defense at every position? No, but they have the ability to mix and match and change their lineup to that of a pitching matchup with the flexibility they have defensively.
One of the things that Doc Roberts does is a thing that he took when he was in Boston. And in Boston, the manager would give all of the guys who aren't, they weren't the starters, okay? They were the guys who were coming off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Every Monday, Doc would give, when he was the Red Sox, all the bench players would get a note saying, you're going to play Tuesday, Thursday, whatever. In other words, they knew they were going to play.
Mm-hmm.
They knew they were going to play in the field. They knew that they were going to get their chance. Granted, it may only be 2 times a week, right? Or 3 times a week. But they then knew that, you know what? Okay, cool. I'm playing, but I'm also sitting on the bench waiting to be, entered in. And basically what that does, or at least what, I was told it does, is it gives these role players, for a lack of a better way to put it, an understanding that, we are still part of the team. That the manager doesn't, disrespect the fact that we are Major League Baseball players.
Mm-hmm.
And that we can play. And so what Doc did was, when he was impressed with how that, he benefited from that, for Boston. He took that and rolled it into, how he plays and positions his people for, what's going to happen this week. Well, Kike's going to play infield, Mookie's going to play outfield, and we'll figure out what to do with, the other guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody is engaged in the game because they know, all right, well, I'm not playing today, but I'm playing tomorrow. So they'll go out and take maybe 64 ground balls, or they're, take 100 fly balls or whatever, because they know they're going to get to play. And, it's not like you're just sitting there waiting for, when am I going to get in the lineup? And I think that, from everything I've heard with Doc, is something that he's very, that the players love, because they know that they're not being, shortchanged or overlooked.
Yeah. We'll switch. I'm gonna bring something up because I think it's.
Yeah, go ahead. We've kind of moved into the baseball world here, so go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, I was gonna shift the teams that we're talking about, move things here a little more local for myself.
Okay.
I think the Braves have an interesting set of circumstances because they've now created an expectation in their fan base of winning, really, over their pedigree that they built over the last few years of winning. And this season did not live up to people's expectations. They were frustrated last offseason when their big acquisition was Jerks and Profar.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, on the Braves side of things, right, right now, I have not heard a lot in terms of what they're planning on doing. And they do have a lot of issues that they need to tend to, specifically that bullpen
Mhm.
shortstop.
No, I'll be honest. I don't know. I mean, it used to be that you could take. We talked about John Schuerholz and the 14 consecutive years of them being a playoff team and most of the time winning the division.
Mm-hmm.
Stan Kasten and John Schuerholz, Bobby Cox managing. That's not, again, you can't, it, it's hard to explain, but you can't, if you have a good front office of
Mm-hmm.
people who know what they're doing and who understand every person who plays for the team that they're playing for, you, you're going to be a winner. If, on the other hand, you change up a bunch of things and you move around a lot and you don't have that singular vision, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to win. And I'm not so certain that the Braves have what the Braves built that franchise on. That and Kasten and Sherholz built that on is still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I think their unwillingness to spend, or not, I think their unwillingness to spend cost them Freddie Freeman. Like it cost them Dansby Swanson. It cost them Max Fried. They've been unwilling to spend on the guys that they did a really good job of scouting, drafting, and developing through their farm system. They let a lot of those guys slip away. And as those guys have slipped away, their success has slowly kind of followed. Like it's not been one big drop off, but when things don't go according to plan on the injury front, the way they went this year for the Braves, then you have issues that start to arrive and you start to feel these losses that you let get away, and it seems like it kind of tarnishes a relationship between a front office and a fan base. Things were always going to be good if they let Freddie Freeman get away and they let Dansby Swanson, Max Fried, and all these guys get away, and they continued to win. And like they made changes and backfilled the positions that they were leaving open, and they did so with Matt Olson. And really, Max Fried was at a position that, relatively speaking, they had a surplus at this year, but that just happened that their entire surplus got hurt. Um, they are in a place now where the Liberty Media Group, who is the
Ownership.
ownership group of the Braves, have signaled that they are ready to spend this offseason, but I haven't seen a lot of it. And if you thought like my thinking was that if the Braves are ready and willing to spend, that they're going to take like a shot at Bo Bichette. Now, are they going to reach the same dollar amounts that Bo Bichette might end up commanding? No, but they would probably take a shot at him. I have seen them mention Robert Suarez, interest on him in the back end, but there's not been much mention of the Braves. In fact, I've seen the Pirates more than I've seen the Braves, and that lack of spending in Atlanta is one that I think many people would find unacceptable down in my part of the country.
Well, just kind of wrap things up. For those of you who don't know, Liberty Media is one of the largest media companies in the country, um, worth approximately anywhere from if you take different values, um, at, on the low end $5 billion, on the high end maybe $7-8 billion. So of all the ownership groups in Major League Baseball, the Liberty Group is, if not the highest, they're right next there. They're in the they're it doesn't take long to call roll. Let's just put it that way when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is what frustrates Falcons Braves fans,
Mm-hmm.
is that you do have people who have the ability to spend whatever money they need to spend because they can outspend Steve Cohen if they wanted to.
Yeah, yeah. So, there's been some discontent in Atlanta. I was personally just finding it curious that I really hadn't seen them mentioned a whole heck of a lot in my in the perusing that I go through
And
so
we
far the past
yeah.
few days.
And we haven't even dealt in the amount of money they're going to get from that, from the battery area over there in Atlanta.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a cash cow for the team and for the entire area over there. So, you know, I don't know what's going on with Atlanta. I truly don't. I think I was as surprised as anybody to see them fall off the cliff as fast as they fell off the cliff. And
Yeah.
just for the record, I thought Profar was a good addition.
Well, he was a good addition until he got dinged with an 80-game suspension.
Right, that hurt.
So that'll hurt you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But but yeah, he was a solid addition, and he was good once he got back. Obviously, he wasn't going to ever be eligible for the playoffs
Sure.
last season. Ended up not mattering for them. They did get banged up pretty good throughout the season,
Sure.
so that didn't play in their favor. But they need to spend because they do have very glaring holes on their roster. I think there's a lot of stuff they can do roster wise, but they have to get better as a product because the fan base has enjoyed a level of success that honestly, quite frankly, has spoiled them. They don't like seeing the Phillies win the division. They don't like seeing the Mets win the division. It's a weird way of thinking because it's not the same, but it's a similar way of thinking. Like the SEC championship means a lot to a lot of people in the South.
Mm-hmm.
It does. Like the goals are you win an SEC championship and you win a national title. But if you just win an SEC championship, that season has been a very successful season if you win that. And if you don't believe me, you can go ask Kirby Smart that. I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee he will second that thought process. The thinking's a similar way, I think, in Atlanta. Like I think as much as you want to win a World Series, and winning World Series is great, and that's the ultimate goal, winning that division is where they start every year, and it means a lot to the people of Atlanta to beat the Mets and the Phillies in that divisional race year in and year out.
Yeah. I will close a little bit with this one, and that is, again, I don't live in Atlanta, but I spent a great deal of time in Atlanta. The Braves are the only pro team in Atlanta I think that anybody pays attention to.
Pretty daggum close.
You know, yeah, the Falcons, during the season, they might. Um,
Mhm.
but if you look at the attendance and if you look at the TV ratings, if you look at everything, all the metrics that are important, the Braves are beyond anybody. You could add all of the rest of the pro teams up in Atlanta and still not come close to the Braves.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I mean, I think that to your point about them being spoiled, you know, I think where sometimes you live on what happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s and don't necessarily figure, okay, well, we're doing it the right way because it's working for us now. And
Hmm.
then things change and it's not working for you now.
Hmm.
How quickly can you adapt or do you even attempt to adapt? Maybe, sometimes people get stubborn and say, okay, this is the way we win when it's not a winning process. So I don't know. I think the jury's out on whether or not the Braves are going to be a contender. I think they're being helped by the Mets being, self-destructing, uh,
Hmm.
where people are rushing to get the hell out of there. It didn't. Pete Alonso didn't, have any problem signing a contract. Neither did Edwin Diaz. I mean, I think they all felt that that was not Flushing Meadows wasn't where they wanted to be.
Yeah, and that almost goes back to the we talked about you got to have a culture
Mm-hmm.
with Dodgers, and you can't just have a bunch of hired guns.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of it. Almost seems like that's what the Mets culture was last year
Mm-hmm.
was hired guns. They had a culture the year prior, um, with the OMG, what was that Jose Iglesias?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um, the shortstop that's now in San Diego.
Right.
They had that going on. Like they had a culture. They don't have a culture as much, but they still have, like, at its core, probably a better roster than the Braves do right now.
Mm-hmm.
So coaching can cure some roster deficits, like some talent deficits on the roster. But the Braves need to make additions because Steve Cohen and the Mets are going to punch back now that Pete Alonso is a Baltimore Oriole.
Well, good luck in finding the players they need, because they do need some players.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that signing Soto to such a big deal, even though he's a good guy,
Mm-hmm.
when a guy comes in the clubhouse making more than the entire clubhouse, it does cause some rifts in there. As I say, regardless of how nice, and trust me, he's a good guy, Juan Soto is. There is kind of like a two-tier system. It's like, okay, Mr. Baseball here is pulling in a number that is just ridiculous, and we're not getting anywhere near that kind of money.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of why Pete Alonso is a Baltimore Oriole right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was I don't think he was happy with the Mets spending that money on Juan Soto and then treating him, a guy who's been in that system and with that club for a very long time, like really honestly an afterthought throughout a lot of that offseason last year. I think that it rubbed him the wrong way, all things considered, and that's the reason he's now an Oriole.
Well, he carried that team for many years.
Mm-hmm. I mean, offensively last year, Juan Soto didn't get going right away. Francisco Lindor didn't have his normal type of year last year. Mm-hmm. If you're talking just consistency last year, mm-hmm. Pete Alonso was the best offensive player on the Mets from game 1 to game 162.
Mm-hmm.
So they've lost that now. And, we talked about you can't replace that given the options on the open market right now. They're going to have to start exploring trades, or they're going to have to explore the options of one of those Japanese first basemen who, like Murakami himself provides the pop that Alonso mm-hmm. did, but he also has a much higher strikeout rate than Alonso did.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to have to get creative in their approach to replace Pete.
Well, and the other thing is, they outbid some of the teams on the West Coast who mm-hmm. will be gunning for the Japanese players.
Yeah, because I think you got an ownership group in Seattle that's a little more willing to spend this offseason as well than they have mm-hmm. in the past too.
And the Padres have money, the Giants have money, and we can't forget that there's tremendous Japanese presence in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different places they can go. They don't have to go to the Mets.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, the what's it called? I'm sure the Dodgers will find a way to open up a 40-man spot if they really want to come. So
I think they got a pretty decent first baseman for a while anyway.
They do. I'm more talking about they'll just if there's like a bat that wants to come, I'm sure they can find a way to figure it out.
Oh, they'll get creative. No doubt about that. Well, I'll tell you what. Tomorrow we will talk football, folks. We promise. Mm-hmm. Big game in the South. Tampa Bay and the Falcons playing on Thursday Night Football on Prime, and we will we'll break it down. We'll talk about what it means and who's going to play and who's not going to play, because there's going to be a lot of people we don't know. And the other thing we're going to get a little bit of is the fact that is Jason Pierre-Paul coming back to play a couple of games for the Bucs after he's been retired for 2 years. He's down there in camp practicing right now. I don't think they signed anybody to the reserve squad, like Jason Pierre-Paul. If you don't think you're going to get him up to speed to play, and we're not talking about playing every down. We're talking about playing some time, and we'll see. I mean, if he's capable of doing it, it'll be interesting. If he's not, well, the Bucks have to work on that defense. But plenty to talk about tomorrow on Thursday night football. Had a lot of fun, Matt, today talking baseball. Appreciate you for all the wonderful stuff you bring to the table. It's entertaining and it's helpful. So we hope that everybody has a lovely Wednesday. We'll be back to talk Thursday night football tomorrow right here. And we hope that you guys have a wonderful day. It's a little cooler on the East Coast here. Hopefully it'll warm up a little bit in the next couple of days and we'll have a nice weekend. But Thursday night football tomorrow, prime Falcons, Buccaneers wearing the orange creamsicle uniforms tomorrow. So see if how that works out for them. All right, everybody, have a lovely day.